Ladies and gentlemen, if you've ever wondered why some men keep playing games while others drop the act instantly, listen closely because the truth isn't what you think. A man doesn't stop playing games when you confront him. He stops when he realizes he can't control you anymore. When your emotions don't rise and fall with his attention, when his inconsistency no longer moves you. That's the moment everything shifts. Not because he suddenly matures, but because you've stepped into a version of yourself he can't manipulate, confuse, or string along. Stay with me, because once you understand this one shift, you'll never waste another minute on a man who isn't showing up for you. When you've been pulled into a man's mixed signals, his hot and cold behavior, or his confusing attempts to keep you close without committing, it's easy to believe that the only way to win is to play the game back. But the truth most people never realize is that the moment you stop reacting to his games is the moment he stops playing them. Not because you're manipulating him, not because you're trying to outsmart him, but because you've removed the very fuel that keeps those games alive. Your emotional investment in the chaos. Most games men play are not strategic. They are symptoms of insecurity, of uncertainty, of immaturity, or of the fear of choosing someone who could genuinely matter. A man doesn't play games because he's powerful. He plays games because he's unsure. And when you understand that, your entire approach to dating shifts. Instead of trying to decode him, tame him, or catch him, you step into a space where you don't need his clarity to have your own. A man stops playing games when he realizes he can't move you with inconsistency. When he sees that your world doesn't shrink or expand based on whether he sends the perfect text or disappears for 2 days. When your emotional thermostat is set by your standards, not by his mood swings. That's when the power dynamic flips. Not toward control, but toward honesty. Your strength isn't found in pretending not to care. It's found in caring deeply about yourself. It's found in knowing what you want and being unafraid to lose someone who can't meet that. Because the moment you're willing to lose the wrong person, you create space for the right one to step forward. Men feel this more deeply than you think. When you show you're willing to walk away, not angrily, not dramatically, but calmly and confidently, he's forced to decide. Either he steps up or he steps out. Games only work on someone who stays in the arena. The moment you climb out of the ring, he's left shadowboxing with himself. There is a kind of woman who makes a man drop the act, not because she demands it, but because he realizes the act has no effect on her. She doesn't run faster when he pulls away. She doesn't get flattered when he breadcrumb feeds her just enough attention to keep her hooked. She doesn't accept the roller coaster as part of the process. Instead, she stands in her groundedness, in her serenity, in her ability to say, "This is what I need." And she says it without fear. This is where the shift happens, when you stop chasing potential and start responding to behavior. Not his promises, not his excuses, his behavior. If he is inconsistent, you step back. If he withholds affection, you don't beg for it, you match the energy you're receiving. When he doesn't prioritize you, you don't twist yourself into knots trying to earn a spot in his world. You let his lack of effort speak for itself. And this isn't cold, this isn't detached, this is the most loving thing you can do for yourself. Because love without standards becomes sacrifice, and sacrifice without appreciation becomes self-abandonment. When you value yourself, you build an emotional environment where games cannot survive. The moment a man realizes you won't reward bad behavior, he recalibrates. If he's serious about you, he steps into consistency. He becomes clearer. He becomes more attentive. He becomes more intentional. Not because you forced him, but because you made authenticity the only currency that works with you. The men who aren't ready for honesty will disappear, and that is not your loss. That is your liberation. You don't want the man who only acts right when you cry, when you fear losing him, or when you finally hit your breaking point. You want the man who acts right because he respects you, because he sees your worth, because he knows you don't tolerate chaos. When a man feels he could lose a woman who brings value, peace, and depth to his life, he stops playing games. Games are a luxury of the unserious. Commitment is the choice of the mature. And men will always rise to the level of the environment they're in. When you create an environment of clarity, expectation, and emotional honesty, only 2 types of men remain: the ones who are ready or the ones who remove themselves. Some women get stuck in the trap of believing they must prove themselves to a man. They overgive, over-explain, over-invest, hoping that their effort will convince him to stop playing around. But the chasing only reinforces the game. When you're always available, always forgiving, always accommodating, you unintentionally teach him that you'll stay no matter how unpredictable he is. You show him that you're willing to settle for potential instead of demanding consistency. Your superpower lies in the opposite direction. You show your strength in how you hold yourself, not in how hard you hold on to him. When a woman has emotional discipline, when she doesn't get swept away by every high and crushed by every low, a man realizes he's dealing with someone who lives by her own script, not his. You don't have to raise your voice, issue ultimatums, or warn him about your standards. You demonstrate them in how you respond. When he disappears and comes back like nothing happened, you don't reward it with enthusiasm. When he gives you half effort, you don't respond with full devotion. When his words don't match his actions, you pay attention to the actions. This subtle shift is what makes men take you seriously. They adjust because they see you're not trying to win them, you're choosing them. Only if they show up in a way that aligns with your emotional well-being. And here's the beautiful irony. The moment you adopt this mindset, men stop seeing you as someone they can toy with. They see you as an equal. They see you as someone who elevates their life because you're not driven by fear. You're driven by clarity. And clarity is magnetic. You will notice a pattern. Men who once played games with everyone else behave differently with you. They communicate. They pursue with intention. They eliminate confusion instead of creating it. Because games are for situations where they feel in control. But when they meet someone whose sense of self isn't shaken by their inconsistency, the games lose their purpose. The right man doesn't want to risk losing a woman who values herself. He doesn't want to play when he knows he's dealing with someone who brings emotional richness, depth, and serenity into his world. So the one thing that makes 99% of men stop playing games is this: you stop engaging in them. You're no longer emotionally available for inconsistency. You're no longer rewarding uncertainty. You're no longer seduced by potential. You're no longer willing to negotiate your standards. You choose yourself so clearly, so unapologetically, that he must choose to rise or step aside. And when you choose yourself that boldly, something extraordinary happens. Your energy shifts. You move differently. You speak differently. You stop showing up with the anxious hope of being chosen and start showing up with the quiet certainty that you'll only stay where you are valued. That energy is powerful. It changes the entire dynamic between you and every man you meet. Because men can sense when a woman is operating from fear, and they can sense when she's operating from self-respect. The fear-based version of you tolerates uncertainty because she's afraid to lose what little she's getting. The self-respecting version of you refuses uncertainty because she knows she deserves more than crumbs. And the moment you step into that version of yourself, the men who thrive on ambiguity suddenly have no place to hide. They can no longer keep you on standby. They can no longer string you along. They can no longer use mixed signals as a way to maintain control. You've stripped the game of its oxygen. You begin to realize you never needed to chase anyone. You never needed to decode anyone. You simply needed to see behavior for what it was and stop romanticizing the potential beneath it. The moment you stop accepting confusion, clarity becomes the standard. And clarity is something every serious man respects. This doesn't make you difficult, it makes you rare. And rarity commands intention. A man who wants to keep you will show it. Not through poetic promises or charming words, but through consistent, reliable action. He will move toward you instead of drifting in and out of your life, like he's auditioning for the role of almost good enough. He will communicate instead of leaving you to guess. He will prioritize instead of procrastinate. Because when you show him that effort is the price of admission into your world, he either rises or he removes himself. Most men who play games have never been required to step up. They are used to women bending, chasing, and proving themselves. When they meet a woman who doesn't operate that way, they're forced to become intentional or lose her. And that interruption of their usual pattern is what wakes them up. This is why the most powerful shift you can make isn't external, it's internal. When you communicate with your actions that you are willing to walk away, a man's entire nervous system changes. He stops seeing you as someone he can take for granted and starts seeing you as someone he must protect, cherish, and prioritize. You don't need to be cold to create this shift. You don't need to be distant. You can be warm, loving, expressive, and feminine. The key is this: you are warm, but you are not weak. You are giving, but you are not easily impressed. You are open, but you are not desperate. This combination is what the right man finds irresistible and what the wrong man finds impossible to manipulate. And here's the irony. When you stop participating in the game, you're not only raising the bar for how men treat you, you're also raising the bar for how you treat yourself. You start catching yourself when you're about to overinvest. You start recognizing when your anxiety is trying to convince you to chase. You start noticing when your heart is writing stories your reality cannot support. And instead of abandoning yourself in the process, you anchor yourself deeper. This is the moment your self-worth becomes non-negotiable. You begin questioning anything that disrupts your peace. You stop ignoring red flags in hopes that they'll go away. You stop rewarding inconsistency with loyalty. You stop letting chemistry blind you to compatibility. You stop mistaking intensity for intimacy. You stop holding on to men who should have been temporary lessons. A man can feel this evolution in you. It changes the way he approaches you. He understands that he can't rely on charm alone. He can't rely on temporary affection. He can't rely on showing up when it's convenient. He has to be present. He has to be clear. He has to be consistent, because that is the only environment in which a true connection can grow. When you operate from this level of self-respect, you won't be afraid of losing someone who isn't showing up. You'll be far more afraid of losing yourself. And that mindset protects you from 99% of the heartache that comes from dealing with men who are still playing around with their lives. The games they play: delayed replies, disappearing acts, minimal effort, emotional breadcrumbs, only work on women who doubt themselves. The moment you stop doubting yourself, the game stops working. And if the game no longer works, the player either evolves or exits. This is the beauty of stepping into your worth. It automatically filters out the men who are not meant for you. You no longer have to force a man to be ready. You no longer have to try to inspire him to grow. You no longer feel responsible for fixing him, waiting for him, or rescuing him from his indecision. You see his level of effort clearly and respond accordingly. If he shows up with clarity, you meet him with openness. If he shows up with confusion, you give him space. If he shows up with excuses, you say nothing, you just step away. You don't negotiate your value, you express it. And here's where the transformation truly unlocks. Men begin treating you differently because you treat yourself differently. They feel your boundaries not in your words, but in your energy. They feel your expectations not in your demands, but in your standards. They feel your worth not in your speeches, but in your silence when something doesn't align. Men commit to the woman who doesn't need their commitment to feel complete. They respect the woman who respects herself. They pursue the woman who doesn't pursue the game. They drop the act when they realize you're not an audience member in their performance. You're the director of your own story. Most of the pain women experience in dating comes from over-investing in the wrong person. But when you stop pouring your time, energy, and heart into someone who hasn't chosen you, your emotional world transforms. You feel lighter. You feel clearer. You feel stronger. You become more selective. You become more intuitive. You start trusting yourself instead of chasing reassurance. And it's in this state that the right man recognizes you. Because you are no longer simply available, you are valuable. You are no longer simply hoping, you are observing. You are no longer waiting, you are choosing. Men who once relied on emotional turbulence now find themselves stepping into emotional transparency. Men who once ran from responsibility now find themselves stepping into accountability. Men who once lingered in the gray area now find themselves stepping into black and white clarity, because they know that is the only way to keep a woman who refuses to participate in the gray. And when a man truly values you, he doesn't risk losing you. He stops playing the games he used to play with everyone else. He becomes consistent, not chaotic. He becomes intentional, not impulsive. He becomes direct, not vague. He becomes present, not unpredictable. Because he knows that a woman who has mastered the art of walking away will never be held by anything less than honesty. The transformation begins the moment you decide you're done playing. And once that decision is made, nothing about your life or your relationships remains the same.